All right, hi everyone. Today is the August 11th. This is SIG scheduling meeting. As you know, this meeting is recorded and will be uploaded to YouTube. So please adhere to Kubernetes code of conduct. Let me share the. Oh, I don't know what, like, can you see my screen?
Yeah, we see the meeting notes.
Hello.
We hear you. And
Okay.
we see the meeting notes.
Okay. The problem now is that every time I scroll, I have to go back. And then pause again so that I get to unpause my mic, which is strange update to Zoom. But like, I hope that you see the agenda for today now. I guess we can start with the memory leak issue. So this is an FYI. Now do the same thing. So do you see now the issue?
No, we just see the header of the doc, the notes doc.
Yeah, it's a static.
Maybe you're just sharing the tab instead of a window.
Yeah, okay. Why wouldn't the tab work? It should work, right? Like, share a tab. Why do we have that option if it's so complicated like that? Now, do you see it?
Not yet.
I did that again. Here. Oh, please grant access to screen recording, which I already gave. Okay. In any case, let's. I'll just paste it here in the chat. Yes. So this is the issue that we have at hand with from the memory leak. Just try to share the tab again. You see now the issue, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
Yeah, I can see it.
I can see it too.
Yeah. So thanks to Amy Wayne, I hope I'm pronouncing their name correctly. They discovered the memory leak as related to basically leaking Go routines. We were creating a basically a subcontext from the main context of the scheduler, and we were not canceling it. We were creating threads or Go routines to process the nodes in parallel in the preemption phase during the post filter. So the fix is basically to explicitly cancel that subcontext in the function. And the bigger issue is that like general context that the scheduler creates at the very beginning shouldn't be really used directly. We should have a subcontext created per scheduling cycle, and that one like gets basically garbage collected or like canceled. I mean, on every scheduling cycle, I believe. And so even if we had those issues downstream, they would be caught by the the scheduling cycle level context getting canceled. But like for the hot fix, we just fixed that specific thing, and then we have a follow-up PR that fixes things upstream in the code. We are discussing also ways of how can we prevent these mistakes in the future. So maybe we can figure out a way where we can just basically future-proof it. The problem I see here is that I think this has been going on for many releases, not just the past 2 or 3 releases. If I read the code correctly for previous the code history, and I'm surprised that it got flagged only today. Aldo?
Yeah, I think the thing is that this is not leaking the routine itself because the routine finishes. What is leaking is the context, and then the context it's very small amount of memory. That's why it takes like a few days for the scheduler for the memory to grow. So it's, I guess, kind of hard to spot if you're not paying full attention.
That's a good point, right? And that's why the scalability tests that we have, which basically run, I don't think they take like they take few hours only, even though they create so many unscheduled pods at some point, right? And they get retried while the cluster is scaling up. Those kinds of memory didn't show up, and so on those scalability tests. So as you mentioned, it needs to run for a much longer time for it to manifest itself.
Yeah, so according to the analysis, so at the beginning, I was in the impression that if let's say all the potential nodes has been running, that means the cancel that inside of the check node function will not be called. That is the current status. So cancel function will not be called. So my impression was that the child context will be garbage collected, but it doesn't seem the case. So that also implies for the cases that preemption doesn't help or the quorum hasn't been reached, that means the internal cancel hasn't been called, then we will have these issues. The child context seems to leak some memories out there. So I think that's the problem. And another minor issue is that we didn't pass in the child context into the check node, which is incorrect. So that means the side effects for this little bug is, okay, we run the check node in batch, like 16. I think that's the default number. So that means we still have some flying go routines running, even the cancel is being called because we pass in the parent context instead of the child context. But that is fine because the go routines will finish eventually. But fixing that minor bug will also, gracefully terminate the unnecessary go routines on the fly. Yeah.
Also, this fix is quite one-liner and it should be easy to spot it in the code. Has anyone tried to just through grep just to see all the places where this with cancel context is created, and if there's a corresponding defer like call of the cancel?
Yeah, I mean, Aldo did a quick check, but I don't think it's always the case that you need to call defer, right? Like we discussed one case, for example, when you create the scheduling cycle context, you can't just call defer cancel right away because there is a binding go routine that gets created, and that go routine might not finish by the time we call cancel. And so there's still a lot of nonce around it. And that's to me the scary part. So it doesn't seem like there is like a general pattern that we can follow. Sometimes it's most of the time we think it's case by case. Like you need to look at it and see, okay, does it make sense to call, when to call cancel, basically.
Yeah, and in general, there should only be 2 contexts per pod, I guess, per scheduling attempt. One is the main scheduling cycle, and the other one is the binding routing. So as long as everything is inheriting from those 2, even if we forget to cancel anywhere else,
yeah,
the parent context would get canceled.
Yeah, that makes sense. I just wonder, like, if there is any easy condition to spot, like it's called, for example, the cancel is called inside a function, which is then like processed in a parallel. If like this could be some generic rule or not, just like maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, the challenge is that like if that function creates a Go routine and goes on by itself, then like you might be calling cancel before that Go routine finishes, right? So that pattern basically invalidates the idea of proposing a pattern where for every context you right away call defer cancel. So it's not, doesn't apply in general because of that case, right? Of like basically in the middle a Go routine gets created and doesn't finish in time by the defer.
So we can say we should always follow the patterns. So basically in some testing libraries, we use the cancel and use the with context, and we initialize some informer factory. So in that case, if we pass in the say we have a functionality says create a schedule or what sort of things, and then inside that we create an informer factory and start the inform factory, because inside the inform factory it actually spin up the long-running Go routines. So if in that function we defer the cancel, that means we will sort of close the child context passing the informer factories builder function. So that doesn't work. So just reminder, we cannot use this pattern for all the places, but we need to be careful when or not.
Right, like, I think in general, like as I discussed, for each scheduling cycle, you have 2 main routines, the main one, right, which is the one executing scheduling cycle, and the binding one. So if those 2 have their own, like, context that gets defer cancel, then that should be fine, right?
Yeah, we should do a thorough check if the. I think you mentioned that Go vet can be helpful in some way.
But then like what we just discussed, it doesn't seem that this is obvious. Maybe like our case, for example, we discussed before, like the Go routine getting created in the middle. I don't know how Go vet would catch that and say, okay, it's maybe that's why they're not using it, or they're not using that static analysis in kids.
Yeah, like I just one last note to this, like you might check just to check the other place, like to just locally, for example, to replace all the context with cancel with some wrapper where we like track like if each call to with cancel has a corresponding cancel location. And just like every time the with cancel is invoked, we like log that this specific new context was created, and then we just every time the cancel is invoked, we logged another like a message saying that this specific context was closed, and like maybe try to like do one-to-one like a mapping to see like if at least that helps to discover like missing locations of the cancel function. Like just a suggestion maybe.
In terms of metrics, I guess it's about like monitoring, like the memory leak takes a long time probably to show up, or maybe a metric. I don't know if there's a metric that we can expose related to number of contexts that still exists. Maybe not. We have one for Go routines, but I don't know if we can have one for context, for example. Okay, so let's. Okay, now I think you can see the agenda, right?
Yeah, I can see it
Yeah.
clearly.
All right. So for the discussions, we have one related to record plugin metrics. I think, is that you, John?
No, I think it's somebody with issues, and somebody also create an issue on behalf of him, and that brings up the discussion. So
Okay.
if you click the link, if you click the link, the background is that we use a 10% sampling rate. So basically, the recording the metrics for each plugin's execution. So that is good, but when you see some like scheduling spike, and it happens, if it happens that on that cycle, it doesn't fall into the 10% sampling chance, so that you don't have enough information to correlate the scheduling spike with particular scheduling plugins performance. So that is the background. So the proposal is to make it configurable. So that basically sounds good to me if we don't have other promising solution to correlate this to like the particular plugins performance issue with the scheduling spike. But the tricky thing is that we've decided we will graduate the schedule component config to GA, so it's sort of not doable to add it to V1. So yeah, just want to bring it up to for the discussion, like how valid we should support this requirement, and if yes, what's the potential solution we can provide.
When the scheduler config goes to GA, it doesn't mean that you cannot add new fields. It just means that those fields will exist until there is a V2. So this configuration doesn't seem particularly worrisome to me. If it's needed, I think it's completely legal to have this configuration in the scheduler configuration.
And so in our component config, we actually embed some spec from the component base repository. One particular field is called debugging, but that debugging spec is also associated with some profiling config. So I'm wondering, if we want to support some debugging related fields, we can make it a dedicated struct so that it doesn't confusing with other spec like regular ones, like which impacts the functionality. So we can have a separate field for this. So could you repeat that? And also, when we are at GA, so what's the possible way to like introduce the new field?
So it would be the same as what we do for let's say the pod API.
Okay. Okay.
Pod API is v1, but you can still add fields. But you just have to be very mindful that once you add the fields, even if they are alpha, they cannot be removed.
Okay, I see.
So it's kind of like you only get one chance to get it right.
Okay.
I think, yeah, I think we can discuss this in the code review, whether it makes sense to make it a struct or just a single flag.
Yeah, so yeah, that is one option I want to raise. Like, I'm not sure how the status of using the individual command line arguments. Like in some other SIGs, they're still using the traditional command line arguments, right? So maybe we can introduce a feature and come up with the like a -- experiment XYZ metric to specifically support this instead of adding it to the component config.
But the yeah.
Because
Like
it's a
the problem that
global one.
flags are,
Debugging.
yeah, flags themselves are like they are GA right away, right? Like they are v1 by default, and then you need to have some sort of
A lot of components are still using the command line arguments.
What I'm saying is you need to deprecate, like it's sure it's experimental, but when you deprecate them as v1, right? Using a v1 deprecation policy. So I mean, like, I think we just need to make a reasonable judgment at the beginning. I guess the problem here is just about whether or not we encapsulate them in a struct. Is that the issue? I mean, I don't see a problem exposing that flag in component config.
Okay. Yeah,
it's not a big issue if it was like, you know, we just create a struct and with a reasonable name, maybe something related to metrics, and all metric configurations slowly start to go there.
I say we just proceed with a code review for this. I don't see any major problems.
Yeah, I think Sambashiho also has a requirement in his simulator project. So yeah, I think the Jing Fang Yang, who is the who raised the issue. So yeah, you can speak up.
Yeah, hi. Sorry. So sorry, I was listening, and so what's the conclusion to go ahead and write like a PR for this?
Yes, I would say go ahead, and we'll figure it out during the code review whether the name makes sense or whether we want to have a struct. I think I would just start with I would have to go through the code. You can go through the code, see if it makes sense to add the struct or not. But this is minor, I think, so we can just leave it for code review.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Or you can, before doing your PR, you could always write a proposal in the issue itself, and we can kind of get to some agreement in there before you write the PR. Up to you.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Is anyone aware of other configuration options which might be like made configurable, like from the outside of the scheduler? Like a general question, just.
There are always requests, but
Yeah, there are also some requirement, if I recall correctly. So someone raised a requirement to like make the percentage of nodes to score profile specific instead of global. That is one I can recall. Yeah, and also some requirement about, I think in the, so another requirement says, okay, I don't want to shuffle the percentage of a node to score. You just start with index 0 every time instead of shuffling the index. And that is also another comment. But basically no follow-up on those requirements, so we don't know how many users are demanding that.
Okay, so the decision is basically made per case, and then based on the justification and the use cases, you make a decision if that's the way to go or not, basically.
Correct, yeah. John, do you want to talk about the next item in the discussion?
Sure. So a few weeks back, Lucas started implementing the contextualized logging for the Kube scheduler. Actually Kube scheduler is the first component that is getting this nice improvement feature. So, and the reason to mention this is to get awareness of the SIG scheduling group, and to also discuss if there is if you agree on the approach. Right now, the changes that Lucas made are more or less just propagating the logger, the new logger, and replacing the Klog with the new logger, more or less keeping the same key value pairs, and he's avoiding using the with name and with keys, with name and with values methods, because there's been some performance degradation. So the if you have like some time to take a look at the PR, that would be great. Lucas provided performance measurements for changes, but still those were performed most likely locally. But I think that Alda already checked those performance measurements, and he didn't have like any like disagreements with that. So the idea was or is to go ahead and see if there is like any performance degradation once the PR branches, and if there are, we can always like undo the changes. So like if you have time, or it would be great to take a look and see and decide if you are okay with the direction, and if not, then it would be great to discuss or to suggest what needs to be done to get to a point where we can merge the PR.
So that issue is quite long. It seems there's like so many different discussions that happened. Just going back related to introducing APIs on the pod itself to control debugging and how things. And I'm guessing we are not pursuing those ideas. And at this point, this is only about introducing contextualized logging and in specific places and measuring the performance impact. And the reason we could have a performance impact is because I'm guessing there are a lot of like string operations happening because no.
No, the overhead comes from getting a log from the context, because if you have a chain of context, then yeah, if you say like get key from context, which is what you would use for getting the log. If it's not in the first context, it goes to the parent and so on and so forth. So if your context is very deep, context hierarchy is very deep, then you're always going all the way up. That's
there isn't like any safeguards against this, like say, okay, the deepest should be this much, and then somehow prevent that deep stack or like, I don't know, path.
I think there is no general guidance. We just have to be super careful. Jan, do you have any other insight? How we can
No,
avoid?
unfortunately not, because Lucas was mainly involved in this effort. So I'm just like talking on his behalf, more or less. But like what you just mentioned about like going deeper into context, that is like a perfect concern for waiting until we resolve this, and maybe to redesign the, if there's way to redesign the searching in the context. I don't know, to maybe to introduce some sort of a cache instead of going up and up and up and up. But for that, like, we need some performance measurements first, or at least find a referential machine where we can measure the differences. Like, I'm not sure how far the context is actually going, but I think, but yeah, right, yeah.
This is this like a Kate's library or like something we are importing from the outside and still under the Kate's project, or completely?
It is Klog.
Okay. I guess
I think my
yeah,
stance is, sorry, I think my stance is let's proceed with caution, because it's gonna give us contextual logging is useful, right? We just have to be careful, and we have to start small.
Yeah, I have one comment on this is that, so if we think about logging, we usually, the most useful area is that we have some issues or we have some unscheduled paths. So we check the logs and we want to get more information. So in terms of this practical usage, I would see like in the benchmark test, the preemption test, which will, although it doesn't prompt a lot of unscheduled paths, but it will, like the first attempt of the scheduling the high priority path will go through all the nodes. So maybe you can generate more logs. So it may have a larger factor to show how the performance differs. But to go a step further, I would say to craft some tests to come into some unscheduled pods so that those unscheduled pods can go through all the nodes, like 5,000 or 2,000 nodes, to generate more logs, so that maybe can be more helpful. Because if you're running the happy path of like scheduling paths in the 5,000 node, you actually just hit by default, I think the 10% is 500 nodes. So that doesn't generate large volume of data to look into potential performance issues of the contextual logging. So yeah, so I'm looking at the Google Doc of the preemption related metric comparison.
But like your concern way is more related to how many logs we're producing versus and this is not like directly impacting whether or not contextual logging is going to be like whether we want to proceed with the current PR or not, right? Because irrespective of that, like we need to monitor how much logging we're producing. No?
Yeah. So we don't have a metric showing that, right?
Yeah. Your file size. Right, like the logging file. I don't know how you process it. And like I guess different cloud providers do different things, right? Like they tail it and send it somewhere else. But like how many logs you're printing, if you're like, is one issue, and using this new approach for logging is probably a different one. Am I understanding correctly what this distinction, right? Wait.
Yeah, I just want to correlate the volume of the logging generated versus the final result. So because if the logs was not hit too much, and then by looking at the eventual benchmark results, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Right?
Yeah, I get it. Right. So there could be paths where we have deep context, but those paths are not regularly hit, for example, at least in our benchmarks, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Do you have any action items in this one? Do we still want to move forward, or are we asking for more benchmarking? Are you asking for more benchmarking for specific scenarios?
I'm just wondering, we can like we should correlate the result with the core number of the contextual logging. But I'm thinking about the easy way to achieve that. Because otherwise you have to do it pretty ad hoc, which is pretty troublesome.
I don't think that the amount of logs will increase because, or like I haven't seen the log lines produced by the contextualized logging, but I think it will be the same amount. The only difference will be that those log lines will be just longer because you will see more context.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you have any suggestions, maybe we can discuss them on the issue.
Yeah, that's true.
Or confirm that there are no recommendations for additional testing and just basically act that we're moving forward. Okay. I guess that will be it for today. Any last comments before we?
I would just quickly like to just mention the current state of the descheduler project?
Very good idea. I was
like-
just about to come to and ask about it.
Great. So we have Mike on the call as well. So Mike, like, feel free to interrupt me at any point. So right now we are in the process of migrating the strategies into plugins. We are almost done. We have like 2 or 3 strategies left, maybe 4. And once this is done, then we can start introducing more of the framework types and helpers and running the plugins and the individual extension points. We don't have like any specific deadlines, but the idea is to, at least before we release a new descheduler release, we want all the strategies to be migrated to plugins. And once the framework or its first implementation is in place, we are happy to accept new suggestions how to improve the code base. So like, Mike, like, do you have anything else to share?
Yeah, I think that was a pretty good summary. Thanks, Jan. Jan has been taking a lot of the lead on getting the reviews done and making sure that these strategy migrations are going well. This is really just like a big refactor of the descheduler code base. And although the framework approach and the plugin approach is going to be great for people who want to extend it or customize it, maybe there's use cases out there like that. It's also, our goal is to create like a much more maintainable code base so that we can build this more towards a stable tool that people can use, and with that a bit of a framework that they can develop their own eviction logic with. So yeah, like Jan said, this shouldn't impact any of our upcoming descheduler releases. The way that we're migrating them is like really similar to how the scheduler migration went, and that we're kind of wrapping the migrated plugins in functions that treat them as the new plugin type while we are working on the other strategies. So this should be really seamless to anyone that's using the descheduler currently, or like just doesn't care about this at all. So there shouldn't be any effects for that. And if there is anything that seems like it would delay our descheduler release significantly, we should be able to push through and create a release without having to hold anything up on any migrations. But they've all been going really smoothly. Thanks to everyone that has been contributing. And yeah, if there's any feedback, feel free to add it on the Slack or bring it up at a SIG meeting or in the GitHub. But we're, like Jan said, trying to sort of focus on this refactoring effort right now before we take on big new improvements. So yeah, thanks for bringing it up, Jan, and thanks for all of your work and for everyone else's contributions.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Mike, for the additional heads up and the information. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Jan and Mike. Are there any questions, comments? All right, thank you so much. We'll see you in 2 weeks and in 1 week, I guess, for the APAC time zone meeting. Bye.